Hey guys, Jeff here. Bear with me on this one. There's kind of going to be a lot to this video. Number one, I went back and I wanted to get a master texture palette, if you will. And so what I did was I downloaded a bunch of textures from OpenGameArt, threw them all into a directory. There was several different, basically there's 400 textures, and I loaded an old function that I created in PowerShell. Now what this does is, don't ask me, it's been so long I don't remember. No, it loads each particular, you give it the location of a directory, and it looks for the files, and you give it a number of textures in the X direction, a number of textures in the Y direction, the size of the X and the Y, the copy, basically the end product of what you want your file to be. And it will literally build within Windows, completely separate from OpenGL and programming. It will build this. This is what I built out of all these textures. And what I wanted to do was put that inside my program here. Let me show you what it does really quickly. So the blocks have now 4 different textures they can choose from. The first texture, all right, is going to be your gems. So we've got the gems. The other one is this maze one. Remember the maze one? Okay. The third one is the texture that has the different textures on it, the one I just put together in PowerShell. And then the fourth and final one is not a texture at all, but it's a color, but in this case I'm just treating it as a type of textures for the Fragment Shader. And I put it on the spheres as well. So the spheres all have this, except for the solid colors, which I haven't put in the Fragment Shader yet. So what I had to do in the Fragment Shader was declare uniforms for each separate texture, except for the color. This one, what I did was I threw in a particular uniform for the, when you go into the house and you go to render, see, it sends in a block type. Okay, now I had to add this to the actual block, so that's just another integer. It's an unsigned integer. It's a random number between 0 and 3, and if the block type is 3, that's a color. So the other 3 are 0, 1, and 2. Those are the textures, either the gem texture, the maze texture, or the mixed texture, as I call it. So now if it's texture 3, I didn't want to add in another variable of things to send in. So I just kind of piggybacked on because I figured if it's a color, we're not going to use the texture coordinates or really the transparency just yet. I mean, this is just for testing to get it all functional. So I borrowed those and I sent in the RGB through those. And in the Fragment Shader, you can see I kind of did that here, where the color actually is text X, text Y, transparency, and then I just set the transparency to 1. So I'm kind of using those variables in their improper place, but I just wanted to do that really quickly to make sure I could do it. And of course I knew I could, but I just wanted to prove it to myself. And then the others, just coincidentally, they're all 20 by 20 textures, which apparently I love that that proportion. So it just draws the gem, the maze, or the mix, depending upon which one it's randomly chose. And the same with the sphere. I'll show you the sphere. Now the sphere was a little bit different because I don't actually have a lot of uniforms going in for the spheres, because those are instanced rendered, which means basically when when those are drawn, they are drawn a little bit differently where all the data is sent over. So instead of calling all these draw functions like I do in a kind of a loop inside of the house class, the render loop is right here. It is one draw function, and the data is already there, so it from the instance rendering, it gathers all the data, one by one. And so I piggybacked onto the text ID, and it's only one float, but I only needed for the texture 400. So I used the first 400 to calculate the texture ID, and then I figured, okay, how can I add? And it's in base 10, so I had to add thousands. So I add 1,000 or 2,000, excuse me, or 3,000 based on the other texture. So if it's less than 1,000, I just use the texture as normal. If it's 1,000 plus the 400, then I will subtract 1,000 and then divide and get the texture. And the same thing if it's 2,000, blah blah blah. And same for the third one, which I haven't implemented yet, which will be just the color and all that fun stuff. So this is what makes, again, the spheres. Excuse me. They're going to have the maze, the gem, or the actual mix texture. And as you can see, this is really cool stuff. So anyways, I just wanted to show you all that. There's going to be more on this because I am actually going to perfect this on with the spheres. And then I am also going to figure out how to do the other stuff. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.